ClickUp just solved AI's biggest problem, and it's saving 4 million teams from productivity loss every day. Unlike ChatGPT and other AI tools, ClickUp converges all your work into one platform, so your AI super agents have full context to prioritize tasks, execute workflows, and draft documents instantly. Teams using ClickUp finish work 30% faster and cut meetings in half. Try ClickUp for free today and get 15% off AI upgrades at clickup.com/podcast. That's CLICKUP.com/podcast.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the...
designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your...
windshield wipers. eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying... just beautiful.
Millions of finds, each with a story. eBay. Things people love.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Scary. My name is Will, and each week I narrate your real life paranormal experiences as well as cover some famous paranormal cases along the way. As always, before we get into this week's episode, I need to say a special thank you to our brand new Patreon subscribers who are Carol Cody, Joan, Sarah McAlinden, Greg S, Joanne Bingham, Michelle and Tom Manella. Thank you so much for signing up to the show's Patreon. You are supporting an independent podcast, and it is quite literally just me. If this is something you're interested in, you can find the link in this episode's show notes, where you can gain access to ad-free main episodes as well as exclusive scary episodes, and a brand new exclusive episode will be out later this week. I have 3 listener experiences for you today, so let's get into our first. My story starts in January 1984, shortly before my 11th birthday. We lived in a village just outside of Norwich, Norfolk, in a 1970s house. There was my mum, my dad, and my brother who was 4 years younger. My granddad and his wife lived a couple of miles from us, and we would see them every Sunday. Granddad had been in the Navy, he was an amateur boxer, and then was an ambulance driver for 30 years until retirement at 65. Sadly, around this time Granddad developed dementia. He passed away aged 71 in January 1984. I didn't go to the funeral. Mum thought I was too young. When I came home on the school bus, which stopped at the crematorium near where we lived, I looked up and I saw the billowing smoke and said a private goodbye to Grandad. That evening I remember myself, Mum, Dad and my brother took Grandad's wife back to their bungalow, stopping for food shopping on the way. As we walked to the rear door, walking past Grandad's bedroom, the bedroom light was on. Not only that, but there were piles of his clothes on the bed, and we were all sure that the bungalow had been broken into. I have strong memories of my dad looking around the house, him grabbing the nearest thing to hand to use as a weapon, and strangely, he grabbed a cucumber from the shopping bag and brandished it, which brought a little levity to the situation. There had been no break-in, and we heaved a sigh of relief. A short time later, I'm not exactly sure how long, I arrived home from school one day and remember going to the fridge for a snack and thought I'd bring it upstairs to my bedroom. As I'm climbing the stairs, I start to hear this screeching noise with the tone changing, And to be honest, I wasn't sure what I was hearing. Maybe somebody had left a radio on or TV. So I checked each room and there was nothing that I could see that was making this noise. And the noise continued. I ended up following it to my bedroom where the loft hatch was. And the noise was coming from the loft. And it was then that I had this sudden realisation of what I was hearing. It was the violin my granddad had given us, a family heirloom, and Dad had stored it in the loft. I was genuinely terrified. So much so that I ended up locking myself in the upstairs shower room and stayed there until my brother returned home from school. And the noise continued as my brother came in. I heard him walk up the stairs, so I unlocked the shower room door, and I remember asking him if he could hear the noise, and he said that he couldn't. I didn't mention anything to my parents, as they probably wouldn't have believed me, so I kept it to myself. Shortly after I began hearing scratching and footsteps in the loft, I told my parents. It was just mice, they would say, and yes, probably the scratching was mice, and they were duly caught in traps. However, for me it didn't explain the heavy footsteps I was hearing. Mum would say, just mice, and I'd reply saying, what, wearing hobnail boots? And there was something else. Not long after, the doorbell began to ring intermittently. There was no one there. This happened numerous times until my mum took the batteries out. The phone would ring. I had a phone next to my bed. I would answer it and I would just hear white noise. And it also happened when the rest of the family answered the phone. Around this time, I was having a hard time at school. I was bullied by a few kids. Not beaten up as such, but it was unpleasant. There was a couple of teachers there that I disliked also. My mum wasn't very sympathetic. Her attitude was, well, you must have done something to them or they wouldn't be like that, would they? I remember I felt very alone. I had a few friends, but I couldn't really confide in them. My dad, he was a van driver, and he worked really long days, sometimes 12 to 14 hours. So that meant I didn't really see much of him. In 1985, he had an accident in his van. Not his fault, but a woman had died. Our family blamed my dad and they sent letters threatening me as revenge. Apparently the kids at school knew about the accident and used it against me. I say apparently because I have little memory of this period of my life. It was what my parents told me many years later. I think I blocked it out as it was so traumatic. In September 1985, I started high school where I was much happier and made more friends. The activity in the house seemed to subside, although I do remember feeling hyper alert. My parents sold the violin at auction, which I found out later. When I did, I wasn't happy. It had been passed down a few generations, and that's when it came to light that my parents had actually heard the violin playing in the loft. Probably the reason why they wanted to get rid of it. The strange thing about all of this was my brother actually never heard the violin. I moved out in 1998, and it was a relief to have my own place. Not long after, I decided to see a spiritual medium who was very well regarded in Norwich. One of the first things she said to me was, "Why is your granddad showing me a violin? Did he play?" She told me that he was sorry for frightening me, but he wanted to let me know that he was around. About 1 year later, in 1999, I had an Australian friend of a friend stay for a few months. I hadn't ever mentioned my granddad to her. She was a smoker and regularly went out the back garden. And she told me that she saw an old man just standing around the garden. Not just one, but every time. And I brushed it off, but privately I wondered if it could be my granddad. So 20 years later, I bumped into her, and one of the first things she mentioned was the old man she would see in the garden. There have been many strange things that I have experienced that I credit to my granddad. One day I was in the spare room, and I was thinking about granddad, and suddenly the light bulb exploded and ended up in the hallway. It was quite shocking. I remember picking up the light bulb. It was hot despite not being switched on, and it was broken at the base of the glass, but otherwise it was intact. Various things have continued to happen around me over the years. On returning from holiday once, I discovered a large and heavy pot plant in the middle of the lounge floor. I desperately tried to rationalise, but there was no way I could debunk that. I've moved house a couple of times more over the past 20 years, but things have continued to happen. Clothes have disappeared and reappeared in the wardrobe. Other items disappear and are nowhere to be found, only to turn up somewhere obvious a couple of weeks later. The TV used to turn on in the middle of the night for weeks on end, usually between 1 and 3 in the morning. There must now be hundreds of things that have happened around me over the years. Years later, I read the biography of Steve McQueen, and on his death, his family also received phantom phone calls and rings on the doorbell. And the last thing that happened was about 8 weeks ago, when the 7-figure nativity set in the lounge had all turned to face one way, looking like they were doing the conga. I thought it was my partner, but it wasn't. It did make me smile. I'm no longer terrified as I was, aged 11 and 12. And I find it comforting that family members can seemingly still visit me. Thank you, Adam, for sharing your paranormal experience, and it definitely is comforting that your granddad seems to be still around. Now, let's get into our next. My experience happened either 2012 or 2013. I do remember it being cold, early spring perhaps, late March, early April time. I would have been in my early 20s, I'm now 36, and I had been seeing my now wife, then partner, for several years then. We enjoyed mini breaks and had done much of Europe. However, one weekend we decided to keep it closer to home and have a trip to Edinburgh on the train. We ended up booking a travel lodge next to the station, which happened to be an old building. We did some sightseeing, saw the castle, and ended up going out for a few drinks on the Friday. On the Saturday, we had done shopping, enjoyed some more sights, and had booked an evening ghost tour, specifically the South Bridge Vaults, meant to be one of the most haunted spots in Europe. I won't go into too much detail here, but it's an underground maze of rooms and corridors where the less fortunate in society would live. And as a result of predatory opportunists and foul conditions leading to disease and sickness, many fell victim in these vaults. And you may think that this is where my experience happened, but it wasn't. Apart from the odd cold draft and a oppressive feeling in a room occupied by a not very nice individual simply known as Mr. Boots, nothing obviously untoward happened. I did, however, have a headache and felt like I needed to get out of said room. However, I do put this down to simply needing a drink of water and general claustrophobic conditions. I am and still remain quite sceptical to these things and won't jump to ghost. I remember the group dispersed after the tour and we climbed back up to the surface before making our way back to the hotel. We both must have fell asleep fairly quickly at around 10 p.m. The next thing I remember is being woken to the chain going off in the bathroom as if someone had flushed the toilet. I woke up to my partner fast asleep, and my eyes were pretty much now glued on the bathroom in fear. I initially thought someone was in our hotel room. I then heard the chain yank again. It hit the tiles on the wall, and the toilet half flushed, again beginning its cycle. So I pushed the covers back and I walked towards the bathroom door quickly, turning on the light, expecting to see someone. However, it was just the sound of the toilet completing a flush and the chain slightly swinging. To anyone thinking that this is faulty plumbing, I told myself the same thing. However, this was a pull chain, old-fashioned, and this thing happened twice in succession. I also couldn't explain how this would physically move a chain. I ended up sleeping with the bathroom light on that night. My partner slept through the whole thing, and I didn't mention it to her until we got home. So, the next day, it's the last day in Edinburgh. We had booked a late train in the afternoon. It was a lovely, fresh spring Sunday. We had done Arthur's Seat that morning and we were walking past the palace area, making our way to a restaurant or a cafe for lunch. We had just crossed a road and clearly both heard someone who sounded in a rush walking behind us. And we both looked at the exact same time to nobody. An empty street, no hiding areas, nowhere someone could have dived off across the road before we saw them. And the odd thing was, the sound we both agreed we had heard on the pavement behind us was the sound of boots. A clip-clopping sound of someone in a rush behind us, as well as feeling someone was there. Our odd experiences didn't follow us back home, and I don't recall anything else happening that weekend. But that was my experience. Thank you to Gregg for sending in his paranormal experience. I was actually in Edinburgh once, and I think I did the same tour as you did, although I don't think I had Mr. Boots attached onto me, and I do not claim that energy. Do not flush my toilet tonight, please. And now, let's get into our final paranormal experience. This all started last year, and at first, it didn't feel like anything huge. It was just annoying stuff that I kept brushing off. Like I'd come home and my phone charger wouldn't be where I left it, or my headphones would be on my desk instead of my bed, or my hoodie would be folded when I know I didn't fold it. And I kept telling myself I probably moved it, probably forgot, because everybody does that sometimes. But then it started happening when I was asleep. I'd wake up and my light would be on even though I always turn it off, or my door would be open even though I always closed it. And one morning, I woke up with my bed in my hand even though I very clearly remembered plugging it in and setting it on the nightstand. And I just remember lying there staring at my phone, feeling really confused and kind of uneasy because I genuinely didn't remember waking up at all. And I remember just feeling this low level of fear that I couldn't really explain, like something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. I didn't tell anyone at first because I didn't want to sound dramatic, but it kept happening. And after a while, I started paying more attention to how my room looked before I went to sleep and how it looked when I woke up. And most of the time it looked the same, but sometimes it didn't. And that bothered me more than if it changed every night because it made it unpredictable. I remember one morning my blanket was folded neatly at the foot of my bed even though I always leave it messy. And I just sat there staring at it, and I remember thinking, I don't do that. I remember just feeling really scared in a quiet way, not panicking. I just felt this really heavy feeling on my chest. And I eventually told my mom about some of it, but not everything. Just the stuff in my room that kept moving, and I didn't remember moving it. And she kind of laughed and said I probably was just sleepwalking or half asleep and not remembering. And she explained that stress can make you do weird things, and I wanted to believe her, so I told myself that that's what it was. But it didn't make the feeling go away. After that, I started hearing stuff at night, like really soft movement. I wouldn't exactly say footsteps, it was more like someone shifting their weight or brushing against fabric, and it seemed like it would only last a second and then stop. And I kept telling myself it was the house or my brother moving around or air in the vents. But one night I heard it coming from my closet, and I remember lying in my bed staring at the closet door and feeling my heart beating really hard. I could hear whispering, not clear words, just a breathy sound of somebody talking quietly. And the weird thing about all of this was that it sounded like my own voice. I was terrified. I just pulled my blanket over my head and stayed there until at some point I fell asleep. After that, I started blocking my closet door with a chair at night, and I know that sounds extreme, but I didn't know what else to do. And things didn't stop. They seemed to get more personal. Started finding drafts in my phone that I didn't remember typing. Stuff like, I'm awake, and it's dark, and why can't I move? And I showed these to my mom, and she said I probably typed it in my sleep or when I was half asleep. And she told me not to freak out. But I could tell that she was a little bit uncomfortable too, and that honestly made me worse. It was around then that I also started to feel like I was losing time in small ways. I'd be doing my homework and suddenly an hour would pass and I couldn't remember what I'd been doing, or I'd walk into a room and completely forget why I was there. Not normal forgetting, but like the reason was just gone. One night I was lying in bed and suddenly felt like I wasn't alone, even though nothing looked different. And I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, feeling really scared, not knowing why. Eventually I just fell asleep, and when I woke up in the middle of the night, I couldn't move. And I know people talk about sleep paralysis, but this felt different because I wasn't panicking at first, I was just aware. And I could hear breathing next to my head, that wasn't mine, just slow and steady. And then I heard my own voice whisper right next to my ear telling me not to move. Tears just rolled out of me because I couldn't turn my head or move my hands. I don't know how long it lasted because I don't remember it stopping, but I just remember it being morning. And after that I started sleeping with my door locked. I told my mom I was having bad nightmares, and she said it was probably anxiety and school stresses, stuff like that. And part of me wanted to believe her, but another part of me just knew that something wasn't right. Eventually, the weird stuff slowed down and then stopped. And thankfully nothing big has happened in a while, but I don't really feel relieved. I feel like something tried something and then stopped. And I don't know why. And I don't trust my memory the way I used to. Sometimes I'll be lying in bed and just feel really scared out of nowhere. Like if I fall asleep, I might wake up having done things I don't remember doing. And honestly, that scares me more than seeing something could ever. Thank you, David, for sending in your experience. I've actually suffered from sleep paralysis in the past. I haven't had it in a long time, touching wood as I speak. And it is quite terrifying. You literally cannot move. Thank you to Adam, Gregg and David for sending in your experiences. And once again, if you have your own, you can send it to scaryaparanormalpodcast@gmail.com, or some people like to send it in through audio, and you can still email the audio to that email address. You can record on your phone and just attach it and send if that suits you better. All the links to the podcast socials can be found in the episode show notes. Thank you for listening. And join me next time for another episode of Scary.
If your team isn't using ClickUp, you're wasting time, and data proves it. 61% of knowledge workers manage work more than doing it, switching apps 1,000 times a day. That's work sprawl and costs millions. ClickUp replaces 20 apps with Convergence, uniting projects, docs, and chats, while AI super agents handle the busy work. Join 4 million teams using ClickUp to finish work 30% faster. Try it free and get 15% off AI upgrades at clickup.com/podcast. That's CLICKUP.com/podcast.
If you work in university maintenance, Grainger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Grainger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more. And all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, visit Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Okay, I have to tell you, I was just looking on eBay where I go for all kinds of things I love, and there it was.
That hologram trading card. One of the rarest, the last one I needed for my set. Shiny like the
Designer handbag of my dreams. One of a kind. eBay had it, and now everyone's asking, ooh, where'd you get your...
Windshield wipers. eBay has all the parts that fit my car. No more annoying, just beautiful.
Millions of finds, each with a story. eBay. Things people love.
Youth mental health is a complex challenge that requires comprehensive solutions. We must strengthen after-school programs. We must make digital literacy tools available in our schools. We must work with mental health professionals to support children. And we must empower mentors, educators, and parents to keep kids happy. Learn more about our commitment to finding lasting solutions at empowerourfuturecoalition.com/solutions. Paid for by the Coalition to Empower Our Future. Youth mental health is a complex challenge that requires comprehensive solutions. We must strengthen after-school programs. We must make digital literacy tools available in our schools. We must work with mental health professionals to support children. And we must empower mentors, educators, and parents to keep kids happy. Learn more about our commitment to finding lasting solutions at empowerourfuturecoalition.com/solutions. Paid for by the Coalition to Empower Our Future.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Spring is here. For a limited time, get a free Pura 4 diffuser when you subscribe to 2 cents for 12 months. Layer in fresh, transportive scents for a brighter, lighter spring. Visit Pura.com and refresh your space today.